Hey kids, howdy, and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It is the week of August 18th through the 24th, and I have two announcements. One's about a class, and the other is my birthday week.
Yes.
My birthday, it's the 23rd, and
season.
yes, I am a Leo sun. I was born 4 or 5 hours before the sun would have turned into Virgo back in 1963. I have an ongoing fight with one of my fun friends who's an astrologer as well. And she says, "You're a Virgo. I'm a Leo." Anyway, so I'm going to answer a question that came in that's sort of about my experience of how I channel the astrology information. And I thought it was just sort of funny that this came in right in time for my birthday week. And this Leo gets to talk about himself for a few minutes. But I do want to announce or re-announce and let you know that my Nodes of the Moon workshop is also coming this week. That's on Sunday, the 24th. It's good for all levels because we're going to take you through the basics of the various houses and signs that you need to know to understand the power of your nodal path. So it's good for any level. It's, I think, a $69 exchange. It'll be about 2.5 hours. There's lots of handouts, and I hope some of you will come to that. Just head on over to michaellennox.com. So here's the question that my little Leo self loves so much from Nikki. Hello, Michael and Zoe. I'm a huge fan of your podcast and Red Robe Astrology and am super psyched for an upcoming private reading in December. Yay. But I find myself curious about an aspect of astrology. I'm a tarot reader, and in my practice there are, and she puts this in quotes, book interpretations of the cards, as well as, air quotes again, intuitional interpretations of the cards as I'm doing a reading. I need to take both into account when I'm doing a reading with a client. While tarot is a very different practice, this led me to my question. Do you base your astrology readings and interpretations off the assigned geometry and strict meaning of that geometry? Or is there also an aspect of intuition in your reading style? How much does your experience as a psychiatrist, I'm actually a psychologist, as an intuitive and as an astrologer get poured into your periodical readings and private readings? Thanks for the work you do. I recommend you to everyone who will listen to me. Warm regards, Nikki. Yay. Yay, Nikki. So I love this question because I love talking about everything, including myself. I am all Leo. A couple of things come to mind when I hear this question. One thing that I say to people is, I'm not psychic, but sometimes my mouth is.
Like when you let it flow.
Exactly, right? So I've had people tell me things I've said to them in readings, and it sounds like a foreign thing. It's like, did I really say that? And that's what it is to have like the bigger part of me that I call teacher that is not embodied in my physicality, but is part of my consciousness, I guess. And I lean into that part of me whenever I'm asked a question, that part pops in. Like if you ask me an astrological question and I start to answer, you might notice that my speech gets a little faster. My hands fly a little more intensely around. And that's what it feels like when teacher is speaking through me. I feel wildly animated. Zoe can tell you that by the time we're done with this podcast, I'm covered in sweat, partly because I'm in a studio at the top of my desk that's boiling hot. But also, there's a lot of energy that's coming through me when I'm tapping into that energy. You could pass me in the street and ask me which way is Sunset Boulevard, and I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to feel, teacher, spin my body just from being asked the question. So your language is accurate, Zoe. As long as I just stay in the flow of that voice, what comes out of me will be more from teacher than from me. But it is my mouth and my brain that's making the words, but it's this larger energy that taps through me to do so. To your question of book interpretations and intuitive interpretations, I cannot do one without the other. So I hold sort of like with my left brain, if you will, the book interpretations, the meanings that would be ascribed to the angles every time you use that angle. And every sign has an interpretation that doesn't bleed into the others, right? There's purity there. And I know that structure in a kind of analytical way. It's just right there for me to tap into. And I have a little bit of patterned thinking in my sort of neurodivergence that allows me to remember things that should be impossible to remember all of those details. But I can tap into how I remember that stuff in a kind of quantum way. And then the intuitive right brain is just the voice, like just flying, letting it fly, not judging, not, wondering what something means. Now, I'll get stopped a couple of times. So sometimes I pause because teacher's just not talking anymore, and I have to wait, and people will say, don't hold back. It's like, how I ain't holding back. Like they think I'm pausing because I'm about to say something terrible that I'm holding back. It's like, no, I'm just waiting for the monologue to start up so that I can continue. And when that doesn't happen, Nikki, this is the most interesting thing about me answering this question. When teacher stops talking and he doesn't come back, and I've got to keep going because I've only got 45 minutes, I will go to the principles of the astrology in question and just start talking about the geometry, the signs, and the planet meaning in a very book meaning way. And just by speaking astrology again, teacher wakes up and starts to come through. Now, I've read tarot. I started reading tarot as a teenager. It's not my go-to, although I do a private layout for every new moon and full moon for myself. But interpreting dreams and interpreting tarot cards and interpreting astrology, to me, feels exactly the same. You got to know the structural meanings that are fundamental and universal. Then you got to let that go and just talk.
Just let it go.
Let it flow. It can take a while to get to the place where you can do that because that knowledge in the left brain side, that there's no thing as left brain or right brain. It's just a good shorthand to talk about analytical and intuitive thinking. We're relying on what's in the analytical thinking. That part of our brain has no flow and intuition. And so we might stop ourselves because the rational mind is grabbing you and saying, wait, is that right? Is that right? So you got to learn things in a kind of memorizational way, I guess, in order to let the intuition fly. But all of you out there listening, trust the flow more than the reliance on the structure because you're more intuitive than you know, and you know more in the psyche place than you know. So just open up your mouth and have at it. Now, at this moment, with all of my brain fog, I can't remember what, next week is, the last week of August. But I can tell you that this is the gentlest week that we've had in a month that has been deeply challenging. And then in the last week, we have another sextile from the outer planets peaking, and right, so next week promises to be a little bit, kind of like the first 2 weeks were, and there's a coasting that we have. In fact, in terms of the things that I tend to speak about, I'm only going to talk on the podcast about major transits, and I'm not going to give you a day-to-day, summary. You can get that with my videos or you become a subscriber to Daily Astro Alerts. And there's really nothing to talk about until Friday when we move into the Virgo mansion. So Virgo is the 6th sign of the zodiac, right? And there are 12 altogether. So this is the bottom of the chart, if you will, where Aries is first and then Virgo is the last in what we call the northern hemisphere, or the bottom of the chart. And these are the signs and the portions of the chart that represent our sense of self. The first 3 signs is us, and the second 3 signs is us in relationship to our immediate environment. So we're still in the realm of the personal as we're moving through the first 6 signs of the year. And this is where we step into healing and organization, putting things together, dotting I's and crossing T's. And because Chiron is one of the rulers of Virgo, you can consider the 4-week process that starts on Friday to be an opportunity to put some of the things back together inside your blown up psyche and sort of, find a way to feel like you understand the complexity of what you're to do every day, because that's what Virgo invented. Virgo says, hey, we're alive every day, so we got to know what we're going to do every day. And she might hint at, say, and if it's of service to others, good choice. She's also the sign and the house of being of service to others. And this is where the Chiron rulership made that even more juicy when Chiron was discovered in the 70s. Virgo has always been about organization, healing, and health of the body and being of service to others. But Chiron the healer comes along in 1977, and it was agreed upon in the world of astrology that the rulership should be Virgo. So as somebody who does a lot of shadow work and teaching and have done a lot of my own healing, I love this mansion for that reason. When I teach about the signs, I often use a sense of the sort of evolution through them to tell a story. And with these first 6, the story's really obvious, right? We start out in the void of Pisces, where nothing is in form, but everything is possible. And there's an energy that rises up in that void that says, I'll go. And it's the movement, courageous sense of Aries, who will dive and start anything up no matter what. So Aries pops in, says, I am, and we're here. Then we move to Taurus. Taurus says, okay, if we're here, where are we? Taurus invented the earth herself and the idea that it's pleasurable to be here. Gemini comes next and says, well, if we can't connect with each other, we're lost, so I'll invent language and connection. Cancer comes along and says, yes, but we need to be safe. We need to protect. We need to restore. We can't just be out there on fire all the time, so I'll invent birth and protection and home and hearth. Leo says, but the point is joy. The point is to laugh and dance and enjoy all of the beautiful things that life has to offer. And Virgo comes along and says, well, I know what to do. I'll build you guys a Merkaba, a body, a vehicle to carry us through. But here's the thing. We're going to have to tune it up every day. So if there's a message or a mantra for Virgo season this year, let it be that I attend to my wellness and my spiritual fitness and my capacity to serve others as a daily routine. It's different every day, and I know how to show up to each day based on what it's asking of me. And blah, 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 blah. So it is. That's a very long prayer. But you get the gist. This is the mansion to sort of attend to both your personal sense of healing, get shit organized, and more importantly, and most importantly, make sure that you're attending to your needs on a daily basis, because every day is a new day. While the moon will move into Virgo slightly before the sun by a couple of hours, on the first day of the Virgo mansion, we also have our first new moon in Virgo at 0 degrees. Now, this is going to be the first new moon in Virgo of 2. And so in the middle of September, we have another new moon in Virgo at the end of the mansion. Right? That's because the lunation happening at 0 degrees, the sun will not be out of Virgo when the moon completes its lunar cycle, and so they will gather again right before Libra season for a second new moon in Virgo. Now, you probably know about blue moons. That's 2 full moons in a row in the same calendar month. And when you have 2 new moons in a row in a calendar month, it's called a black moon. Now, this is not 2 new moons in a calendar month, but this is one of those sort of astrological traditions that I object to. Because who fucking cares? Like, how is it meaningful that in the same calendar month, there's 2 lunations? Like, I don't see why that would be like germane to our experience, because we are not the calendar. We are fluid expressions of life that uses the calendar for a kind of demarcation experience. But I'm telling you that 2 new moons in the same sign, now that's powerful. Why? Because archetypes are pure and powerful. And this deeply healing, organizing, and integration new moon is followed by a second opportunity to integrate the healing, organizing, integrating experience of consciousness. That, to me, is worth talking about. So you can bet that when we get to next month's new moon in Virgo again, I will be talking about this. And it's just something to think about as you're setting intentions for this new moon, that there'll be like a second chance in about 2 weeks. So Chiron is up in Aries, just about 27 degrees. It's actually retrograde, so he's moving backwards at the moment, but he's, at 2655 Aries during this lunation. Now, a trine from Chiron in Aries would naturally be from Leo, because Leo is a fire sign. And the sun and the moon are in Virgo, mutable earth. That's important because 2 things. Number 1, a trine that crosses over the boundary of new elements is interesting, like it's an opportunity. The reason trines feel like flow to us is that the 2 bodies that are in the trine are generally in the same sign, same element of sign, so they work well together. Well, the new moon energy will be way more powerful than Chiron's energy because it's a big thrust in mutable earth, but it's still holding the trine to Chiron, kind of saying, okay, this is your month, Chiron. You're in Aries firing things up. We're going to take that fiery healing energy and put it right into this entire lunar cycle by virtue of kicking it off with a trine between the sun and the moon and the great healer. You guys know how much I love the 150-degree inconjunct, the fork in the road, and that's very prominent in this lunation as well, which I think is a boon to us, because if it's a healing and integrating lunar cycle, that's going to necessitate that we are moving away from behaviors and ideologies that no longer serve us, or that we drop because we step into more healing. So the sun and the moon are holding an exact inconjunct with Neptune. That means that we're letting go of old beliefs that no longer serve us. We're getting clear about things that might have been confusing before. When we say, like, more will be revealed, that's always a Neptune consciousness, because Neptune hides things with the fog and then reveals them with the lift. This is a lift. This is a reveal. So look for things that you are sort of looking to let go of, but that are confusing or uncertain to you, or they relate to unconscious stuff, or just know that This new moon does have the ability to tap right into our unconscious spaces where intuition and creative inspiration lie. And then this new moon helps us move in new ways by letting go of old unconscious inhibitions. The same geometry to Saturn, well, that's about your actual day-to-day life out there in the world. I like to call Saturn and Jupiter a boots-on-the-ground planet. Neptune is not on the ground. Our outer planet, very far up there in outer space and connecting to our higher self experience of what Neptune brings. Saturn says, you better walk away from some behaviors from healing and integration during this lunar cycle. I demand it. So that demand is built into this new moon. Over on the other side of the solar system is Pluto at 1 degree of Aquarius. 0 degree Virgo new moon hits Pluto in Aquarius in the same inconjunct, the great eliminator angle. Now, this fork in the road is about power and authority and shadow. Because Pluto holds everything that's hidden and unknown, this new moon can help reveal things that have been hidden, just as Neptune is sort of lifting the veil on things you didn't know you didn't know. The inconjunct to Pluto might be an intentional or an unintentional sort of revealing of hidden impulses or unconscious patterns that are driving behavior. And since Pluto is like the power and authority planet, and an inconjunct always invites us to let something go and leave it behind, I'm going to say what's possible here is to set intentions that allow you to own and know your personal power, and that the healing you're going through allows you to know that. Like when we're young and stupid, our power is outside of us. We project that and then we resent it. And part of our growth and healing and shadow work experience allows us to own that we're the power. And this new moon sets us up for a lunar cycle that can embody that kind of integration.
That's lovely.
Well, wait, because there's more.
Oh.
When you have two planets in sextile, 60 degrees apart, they are working well together. It's like the energy of a piston. I mean, you got to turn the engine on for the pistons to work and move. But once you do, it's like chugga, 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 the best sort of energy for making things happen. And so there's sextiles being held with all the outer planets. We call that the grand sextile that's in place now and all of next year. But in terms of this new moon, we're very much looking at Neptune and Saturn together, sextiling Pluto. A sextile between Neptune and Pluto is an energy that allows us to work with power and gravitas and transformational energy and mix it with our intuitive sensibility, our creative inspiration, and the flow that can happen when we're like in the groove. That's Neptune. So that's powerful motor of two planets working together. And then you add Saturn to the mix. As I said before, Saturn is what brings the power of that sextile right down to our doorstep. So that's an opportunity to align with this transformative energy and then step by step by step move through the month and execute and initiate some powerful movement and healing. But when you take another object or planet, in this case the luminaries, the sun and the moon, and you put them on the other side of the solar system, dividing that sextile in half, and then the new moon, the sun and the moon relate to each pair in the 150-degree Great Eliminator angle. You put two of them together, it's called a yod, or a finger of God, or a finger of fate. This is like the yummy capacity to say, all right, I set these intentions and I know and trust that the winds of fate are ready to blow into my sails, carrying me into new territory. I love this for us. And I can promise you that the people who know even a little bit about astrology, the moment they learn what a yod is, everybody wants to have one in their chart.
I do.
That's true. You do. You do. Well, because they are powerful patterns of small changes that can lead to great results later on down the line. And we kind of need that a little bit now because the immediate world is not cleaning up
Garbage.
anytime soon. That's right.
It's garbage.
It's so hard. But, we plant seeds we don't, of trees we don't plant to sit under the shade of. And this new moon has to be a
Yes.
little bit like that so that you're not pushing away life on life's terms, but you're not setting personal intentions based on what's happening out there. You're setting intentions based on the power of the love in your heart to go and have a more magnificent life. Now, there's one more aspect we have to talk about that's part of the lunation, and that's the square to Uranus. So Pluto and Uranus are trining. That's part of the grand sextile. And remember, Pluto is the slow change. Uranus is the fast and revolutionary change. So at 1 degree and 22 minutes of Gemini, that's pretty much an exact square. Squares are conflict and obstacle energies. They create stepping stones that we have to traverse. So here's how to put this unstable element into your idea of what the new moon will bring when you think of squares as stepping stones. The reason I love this image, which comes from Stephanie Azaria, like my only actual human teacher of astrology, she named squares stepping stones because they just set up obstacles to get to where we want to go, but there's no sense of not getting there. If you have to have grit and steadfastness, of course, and all of those, willingnesses to work with the unexpected bumps that happen. But it's possible to get to where you want to go. Think of it out this way. You're on one side of a fast-moving creek or river. You want to get to the other side, and there are stones exactly placed where you might need them, but they're wet, they're mossy and slippery, they're facing different directions angularly, and you can make it, but oh my God, you might fall in a couple of times, or you might slip and sort of twist along the way. But I really want you guys to think of what this square adds as the stepping stones that might be slippery, but then you want to remember the finger of God, that you're being guided and that the world is, in fact, an unstable place where things happen very, very suddenly and knock us on our asses. And so how could you have a new moon at this moment that didn't have chaos, instability, and sudden changes built into it? Because that's the current lay of the land. This is me loving astrology because it's perfectly reflecting this. The world is unstable. We make up the world and the collective. Each of us has an individual responsibility to be operating at the highest level that we can. And this new moon in the healing sign of Virgo, connected to this beautiful finger of God, is the trajectory of energy that says we're going someplace positive. Just fasten your seatbelt. Try not to think about what's happening too much in the outside world. And one step at a time, let this Virgo season integrate you and get every little piece of your psyche lined up like you just had a visit from Humpty Dumpty's crew. On Sunday of this weekend, Mercury will get to 15 degrees of Leo. Huzzah! This is where he started his backward journey. So he went from 15 Leo back to 4 in his retrograde. And so the station at 4 a couple of weeks ago has now had us going over everything that occurred while Mercury was moving backwards. So most of this month has had Mercury going over this territory, and now we're done with that process. You may have noticed that I didn't talk a whole lot about what Mercury was doing each week, which I normally would. But this Mercury retrograde was so wacky because Mercury wasn't making any direct contact with any other planets. And so it was very sort of out of boundsy, if you will, which is actually an astrology term, so I shouldn't have used it because it's not accurate here. But it makes sense, out of bounds. It wasn't like in the groove, and it was pulling us out of the groove. At any rate, it was messy for me, even in the shadow. Like the wrap up was also bumpy, at least it was in my experience, and that ends Sunday. And then we go through what I call the free and clear process, right? For 2 months, Mercury's not anywhere near a retrograde, so it's a good time, especially if you use Mercury in retrogrades for either planning or avoiding planning or announcing things. The next 2 months has no mental sort of, back bump up and communication, and therefore letting the world know what you're up to will not be so challenged as it was this last couple of months. Now, on Monday, I'm going to share this with you now just because if you don't tap into next week's episode right away, there's some interesting news with Venus, who's going to enter Leo on Monday. So she's been in Cancer for the last 2.5 weeks. She'll be in Cancer all this week. She met up with Jupiter in Cancer, so there's been a lot of sort of yummy Venusian protection and healing and gestation with Venus in the sign of Virgo, and she's much more bold and creative in Leo, but we'll talk about that much more at the top of next week's pod. Meanwhile, enjoy Mercury in his free and clear, set some powerful healing intentions, and have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week we have a call-in dreamer from Indiana. Hey Danielle, what you dreaming?
So I have interesting dreams frequently, but the one I had last night, actually early morning hours prior to waking, felt important enough to write to you.
Yay.
In the dream, I was in my bedroom, which was not my real bedroom, but rather a finished attic of a home. It had no furniture or anything in it at all, softly carpeted with the slanted walls going to a peak, as you often see in finished attic spaces.
Yes.
I was waking from sleeping on the floor, and the room was entirely empty with the exception of myself. Seemingly out of nowhere, this is where it takes a
An
rather
interesting
dark turn. A man appeared at a pulpit at the end of the room somewhat long and narrow, with two humans on either side of him. In the dream, he was my father, owner of the home, not at all looking like my actual father, but rather a middle-aged white man with a large belly and balding, and I knew that he was a pastor. He was setting up to hold a Christian church service in my bedroom and to open it to the public. I felt desperately enraged by this and feeling that my personal space was being violated. I angrily told him that he could not have his church service in my room, but he laughed at me and told me I had no authority here, that he owned the home. I struggled with him for a long time, both verbally and physically, as his people continued to set up their church service. He was decidedly sinister, and I knew he was going to be preaching to people a message which would keep them separate from their own internal union with God.
Yes.
I eventually gave up and started to throw a handful of possessions which suddenly appeared into a backpack in order to run away. At this point, I was able to see myself in third person and had reverted to my teenage wild self, dressed in black with chains and combat boots, and even the possessions seemed to be punk/goth type clothing and accessories. And then I woke up.
Oh, wow.
If it is helpful at all for the interpretation, I am 47 years old, also a consciousness coach, astrologer, Kundalini yoga, hermetic philosophy guide. I am opening a public art and awakening center this summer in my very conservative Indiana city of Fort Wayne. All different lineages and mystical traditions will be taught under the same roof with no hierarchy of modality. So I'm so curious as to your interpretation of this dream.
Well, let me ask you a couple of questions. That was you as a teenager. Goth, boots, chains, yeah?
I mean, I was like a hybrid of that and a cheerleader. I would go back and forth.
I love that. Love that combo. And what was the religious sort of timbre in the house, in the household? Like, were you guys Christian?
No, but my dad sent me to Catholic church. Catholic school.
Okay.
But we were not Christian. And so it was a weird sort of. My dad is very open, and he had like Buddhist statues in the house, and he had Carl Sagan books and things like
Great.
that.
So I love this because now we're not talking about an inner wound of a kind of spiritual, divorce. A lot of people have to leave the idea of spirit and connection when they deconstruct, and a lot of people are going into atheism from deconstruction, which is certainly better than being trapped by fundamentalist Christianity, but it doesn't set us up to be what you're embodying in the planet. So I'm glad for that. Then we know that the theme is about the town, right? You mentioned that you're putting something incongruous into a very conservative, which I bless you for that, honey. Thank you. I mean, that's a radical act. Really. I mean, it is. It's a radical act.
It feels that way, yes.
So we know that that's what it's about, and without even interpreting it, step by step, it's about you moving through the rage and resistance you might have for the risky choice, and the rage that's there about the world that as it is. But there's more. Let's break it down. We'll go inch by inch through and see what's there. So you're in your bedroom, right? So we start the dream as a consideration of you. The bedroom isn't quite as private as the bathroom, where we're naked and have poopy smell, but the bedroom, not everybody gets invited in.
Correct.
That's sort of an important thing for the dream, because this is not about a public issue you're struggling with or something outside of you. It's not even downstairs in the living room of you that's more public. So it really is about your private consideration of what comes next. So we'll just say reckoning with what you're about to do. But it's important to at least establish the sense that what we're looking at is you. The attic is the highest room in a home. It's up top, so it connects with thoughts. It connects with intellect. It connects with thought patterns. This one's finished, right? So to me, since it's your dream, you're in a really nice space in your sort of neck up consideration. It's soft to the touch at the bottom, right? So you can be comfortable there. the peaks that you see in a lot of dormers that make peaks. I like that as a shape that points sort of up. It sort of takes all of the energy in the attic and says, we're looking up. We're looking into the highest consciousness. The fact that there's no furniture to me is also like a good news because it says there's open space for possibility. It's not crowded and clogged up with like agenda and past stuff. You're like in a really open place it's not exactly new based on the things you said in the dream, but it's a bedroom in a home you don't really know. So on that level, it's a new consciousness. So then we switch to the sort of the conflict, right? I spent time in the opening of the dream treating it as if it was a dream in and of itself. Because those images are really about Danielle's integration and whole self, ready to like take on something new. And then we get sort of immediately put into your psyche telling you, this is what's in the way. You may not think it's in the way, honey, because you're in your conscious awareness of rah, rah, rah. Let's look what we're doing. I'm ready. I feel courageous. But if you don't look at the places where the fear lives, you can't be as powerful and integrated to go off and face what you're about to face. So this dream is one of the ways that you're looking directly at a patriarchal message, not even an attractive message, right? That he's bald and fat to me is about the distance between what is lovely and what is an awful message. The two humans beside him make it a trinity. So there's power in that sort of visage, that image that you're seeing. Were you going to say something about that?
No, it was just an aha moment to what you said. Yeah.
So this is why we like that, he doesn't really look like your father, but he feels like your father because father is a good image of patriarchal sort of diminishment, right? The father in the conservative sort of milieu that some people are trying to make America all of. Father has all the power and authority and women have none. So it's like you're looking at the very sort of conflict that might be. And then the rage comes. That's also important for you to have access to so that when the person comes into the shop that's going to bring a fight, you've already been with your rage and it's not hidden. It's looked at, it's integrated into you, and this dream is a bit of that. You express the rage, that's it. So that's an experience of integration then comes. And he tries all his sort of tricks of, no, it's my home. That just reminds me of America and First Nations people and America sort of killing everybody off saying, no, it's my home. And it's like, no, it never was. Why I love the end of the dream, and I do. First message for me is, if you have just a handful of possessions in a backpack, to me, that looks like a readiness to go on a trip, to go on a healer's journey. I meant hero's journey, but I said helos, right? That's you in a backpack says, I got my things that I need. I can start the journey, and it's simple. I don't need a lot, just me, because I'm the power. I'm the authority. I'm the one who owns all of my consciousness that allows me to make this project happen and put all of me into it. Mm-hmm. How much of that teenage wild self, boots, chains, what I get from that is rebellion. Rebellion, rebelliousness. Were you a rebellious teenager?
Oh, yes. Yeah, even in 8th grade, Catholic school, chose not to be confirmed with my class.
Oh, fabulous, baby. Oh, I love you. That's perfect. So what your psyche is saying is you don't need to take much with you on the journey. That to me says preparedness, readiness, right? You don't need to bring a lot because you've got what you need inside you. And then by bringing in this aspect of self, this sort of third person consciousness, it's you, it's your rebellion. It's the part of you that even early on said, nope, this is wrong. I will not confirm this faith. And so you're sort of doing that again, only collectively, louder, and in a place where you're likely to get some pushback, which means you're becoming an activist as you become a purveyor of yummy stuff and through consciousness and healing. Love it.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me because I did spend a lot of my adult years as an actual activist politically, and decided to
Ah,
leave that behind, because it felt so much like a dead end.
I
Um,
get that.
to me, after years of doing it and taking me away from my kids and all that.
Got it. Well,
And yeah.
one of the things that I've been saying a lot ad infinitum in the last 6 to 9 months is that we all must activate. But we activate at the level of who and what we are, what we bring, how we want to live our lives. So to me, like, I love hearing that you were once a sort of a loud and proud stand on the soapbox activist. But to me, what you're doing in this point on a map is more activism than anything you might have done in the past yelling loud, because you are creating the possibility of confrontation and change in your orbit. That's powerful activism. So have at it, honey, because
Thank
we
you.
need you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.